On today's episode, our overgrazing section is focused on grazing cattle on small acreage or on a homestead, small numbers, and how to manage that. In addition to grazing cattle on small acreage, we're going to talk a little bit about bulk selling chickens or bulk selling pastured poultry. I think it's an excellent idea. We get into non-GMO versus GMO, just a touch. Using milk in-house versus selling milk out to consumers, culling decisions, and moving frequency. Think you'll enjoy it? Let's get started with the Fast Five. What is your name?
I'm Janelle Anderson.
What's your farm's name?
The Haven Farmstead.
Where's your farm located?
Southern Middle Tennessee, Wayne County is our county. Closest town is Waynesboro.
Oh, wonderful. And what year did you all start grazing animals?
So when my husband and I married, I would say I included into that grazing.
Yeah.
So 2000, oh my goodness, he would be so mad if he knew that I was struggling on this. 2009 is when we were married.
Oh,
And-
yes.
And so he had cattle with his parents that on the ranch that he grew up on. So that was part of my indoctrination into it. Other than, I guess I could go back and say from when I was in second grade, because we did have horses and other livestock growing up in Wisconsin.
Oh, very good. And what species do you graze?
So currently we have family milk cows as well as beef cattle. And then we have hogs at certain times of the year that we do. Most of them are run into the woods, though. They're not so much in the pasture. They're on the edges of it, helping clear some things. And then we do chickens that we graze on our pasture, though. They're not eating a ton of that stuff.
Right. But that manure is so nice.
It is. Yep.
And do you also have turkeys as well?
We do. We do turkeys. Every year I say I'm probably not going to do turkeys again and chickens, to be honest. And my husband says, do you see what's happening out there in the pastures? We're going to continue doing poultry. And I look and I'm like, yes, it makes sense.
Welcome to the Grazing Grass Podcast, the podcast dedicated to sharing the stories of grass-based livestock producers and exploring regenerative practices that improve the land, animals, and our lives. I'm your host, Cal Hardage. And each week we'll dive into the journeys, challenges, and successes of producers like you, learning from their experiences and inspiring each other to grow and graze better. Whether you're a seasoned grazer or just getting started, this is the place for you. Attention ranchers, are you ready to boost your ranch's profitability in 2025? Join Noble Research Institute for Noble Profitability Essentials in McKinney, Texas, this January 28th, 29th. This transformative 2-day course will help you unlock the full potential of your land and livestock. Noble's experienced advisors with over 200 years of combined experience will guide you through proven strategies to enhance your bottom line. You'll learn how to improve soil health, maximize forage quality, reduce costly inputs, and optimize stocking rates. This course is designed to address your unique challenges and build lasting solutions for your ranching operation. Through hands-on activities and interactive conversations, you'll gain valuable skills to create a more resilient, productive, and profitable ranch that will thrive for generations. Don't miss this opportunity to learn from the best and secure your ranching legacy. Register by December 30th to save $50 with our early bird discount. Visit noble.org today to enroll in Noble Profitability Essentials in McKinney, Texas, January 28th, 29th. Invest in your land, livestock, and livelihood this January. Before we jump back into the episode, 10 seconds about my farm. And on the last week's episode, I mentioned we were already feeding hay. I have good news on that front. I was able to find some land to lease that has not been grazed in a year, so I'm moving my cows to it, which will provide a nice stockpile of grass for grazing. I don't know, I hope I get a month and a half, 2 months out of it. We'll see how it goes. 10 seconds about the podcast. 2 things today. 1, I'm sure you've already noticed we have a little bit different format. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You like it? You dislike it? What am I doing? I even added some music to make it more professional sounding. I know a lot of podcasts do that, so I'm just working to be a professional host. Second thing about the podcast, we are very close to 300 downloads. Yeah, 300, sorry. We are really close to 300,000 downloads for the life of the podcast. And I would love to get over that hump this calendar year so we can go into 2025 past that milestone. So to get there, I need your help. Can you share this episode with someone who would enjoy it? That's all I ask. Share it to one person. If each of us shares it with one person and we do it through December, I think we'll be well on passing that 300,000 downloads milestone. Anyway, let's jump back to the episode and talk to Janelle. It's amazing what that manure from those poultry species can do.
Yeah, it's awesome. We look out there even now, and I can tell when we first moved to Tennessee, which was in 2022, the fall of it, when we first started moving our chicken tractors across it, that first section has like really no sage grass. And so it's really cool to see the differences between the pastures.
Oh, yeah. Well, let's jump back a little bit before Tennessee. You mentioned in second grade you all had some horses and other things. Did you think as an adult you would be in Tennessee homesteading, running some animals there?
No, I always said that I never thought I would stay in Wisconsin per se, though I did love the lifestyle that we lived. I mean, we wouldn't have called it homesteading. We would have called it country, I guess. We just lived in the country and had animals and
just what your
and
grandparents did.
yeah, we hunted and we raised most of our food there, but I would never have thought that we would ever make it to Tennessee. I will say my husband is from Western North Dakota, and so there is that bit in the story, and so I would never have thought we would have moved from there to Tennessee either.
Yes. Yeah. And he grew up in North Dakota?
Yes. Yeah. Really, we were like 13 miles from the Montana border, very rural. It took us 30 minutes to drive to the town that had a grocery store, stuff like that.
And what did you all do out there?
So we ranched. We were beef cattle. We had cow-calf operation. We also had a business that his family had owned. It was a Vermeer dealership. So we sold Vermeer haying equipment. We not only sold them.
Spent too much time with those.
Yeah, we sold parts. We worked on them. We sold new stuff, and then as well as other cattle equipment. And so we did that all from the ranch. And so we were about, when we were full with like replacement heifers and our cow-calf pairs, we were about 200 head on a good year. Drought is a real big deal in Western North Dakota, and so we always had to manage it a little hard.
Oh, yeah. Were you all using some regenerative practices out there then?
No.
Or was it more conventional?
It was pretty conventional. Part of the ranch was into a lease with the government, and so when we moved in the summer onto that leased land, you can't put cross fencing out there. You can't do anything. And so unless we wanted to spend our time horseback moving them every day and try to keep them in a spot, it wasn't really easy to do. And then when you have winter, 7 to 8 months out of the year, it felt like you kept them pretty close when you're feeding them. So yeah, it's a whole new ballgame. Though we did have people that were starting to step into that regenerative movement that we were friends with, and so I was always curious, like, why are they doing what they're doing? They're bale grazing in the winter, like it's just like these different processes that we just never saw before.
As I think for North Dakota, we have not had a guest on the podcast from North Dakota. One of the few states we haven't.
Well, you can kind of claim it now.
Yeah. I'll put an asterisk out beside it. Kinda.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And then you all decide to move to Tennessee. What led up to that decision?
I would say the catalyst was my dad ended up passing away in the fall of 2021, and we kind of were really looking at what we were doing, how we were living, and with our family, and how intentional we were not being. It was not out of the realm of thinking that my husband would be working 100+ hours a week, and that's a lot. And while it provided for our family, and we were very thankful for what we were doing, it felt like our family was getting kind of left behind. And so we really just had a heart to move towards being more intentional with our time and our resources. And it afforded the opportunity to move states and start all over on raw land, which is what we did.
You bring up an excellent point there. That balance is never the right word because it's never really balanced, but the ebb and flow of work life and family life, and when you have a farm, that gets blurred so easily, but you've got to maintain some of that family time.
I think that was the hardest part for us, was separating it, because our
Oh,
customers could always know that we would be there. If we weren't up at the shop, we were
oh
down at
yeah.
the house or working with the cows or stuff like that. And so we were always accessible. And
Oh yeah.
that was really hard to walk through.
Oh yeah. I'm sure I haven't dealt with it on the customer level, but as we were talking earlier, I grew up on a dairy, and those dairy cows are quite needy. Um,
Right.
Especially the way we were doing it, but it just a lot of hours and stuff. My wife would say I'm getting better at it, but I'm not great yet. But I'm trying to be trying to think of the right word, more deliberate with my
Mm,
evenings,
yeah.
and not to be out messing with cows or even just looking at them, because I can get lost just observing.
My husband is the same way, and I will say I am too. I get most of my observing done during the day, and he does most of his in the evening. And so that's
Oh
really
yeah.
funny.
So you all got this opportunity to move to Tennessee on raw land. How did you get the land ready for what you were going to do? And actually, that begs the question, what was your plans when you moved to Tennessee?
The first and foremost was to be more intentional with our family. And past that, I knew I wanted, because we sold everything. We didn't take anything with us. The
Mm.
only animals that came were our dogs and maybe our feral children, I guess, if you want to.
Oh,
No, just kidding. But with that, we didn't really know the plan beyond like a milk cow. I knew that
oh,
I
yeah.
wanted milk cows. We had chickens up there, so we were going to do that. We didn't know what our land could do, though, so we didn't know
Right.
if beef cattle were even in our future going forward. And so the process started with, we flew down here in April of 2022. We put flags in the ground for our house and our
Oh, yeah.
garage. We flew back to to North Dakota, and we didn't come back until September. And so I was doing the general contracting through email and phone calls and everything with the builders and stuff. We wanted to have at least a frame up, like a
Oh,
closed-in frame to come
yes.
to with our family. And yeah, it was pretty wild. We pulled in September after not being there, and that was our first time seeing our house, and it was pretty wild.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy to think about, leaving there, corners staked or laid out, and then coming back, and you have a structure in place.
Yeah, and we didn't have water, so
Oh, yeah.
there's my one thing to tell people: don't move to a place like we did and build a house and you not have a water source. That was actually really dumb, and we knew better. But we took a chance. We just said that God moved us across the country. He's going to
Yes.
provide. He's going to provide water. Though you think Tennessee, with all of its rivers and creeks and all that kind of stuff, water can be a hard thing to find on property. So we didn't realize that, and good thing we had those rose-colored glasses.
Oh, yeah. How did you end up solving the water issue?
We had right away, when we had come down here and put the flags in for the property, we had contacted the local well driller. There was only one in the
Oh,
area. Got
yes.
on the list, and we were told, maybe a year, maybe a year and a half.
Oh,
And we were
no.
like, oh, good gravy. Okay. Thankfully, another guy moved to town that had done well drilling with his dad in California, and we were the first well that they drilled. And then something happened between the two of them, and we were the last well they drilled. So,
Oh, no.
but we actually
But you got your well
we
drilled.
did. So we moved here in September of 2022, and our well was drilled in November of 2022. So we didn't wait very long.
Oh,
We
yeah.
were, however, and this is something our family will never forget, we were bathing in the river that's just on the edge of our
Oh,
property
yes.
until it got too cold. So October, you think it's still pretty nice in Tennessee, but the river's pretty chilly at that time.
Oh, yeah,
So
the water gets cold, yeah, yeah. Well, that'll definitely be a memory for your kids. How old are they, or were they at the time?
yeah, our oldest was in college, so he wasn't with us. He would have been 18, and then our daughter would have been 15. Our son was 13, and then we had a 3-year-old.
Oh, okay, so the three-year-old enjoyed it while the others were a little appalled by it.
Yeah, he actually requested many times to bathe in the river this summer, and we obliged, because why not?
Why not? Exactly, yeah. So I assume you spent that first winter finishing up on your house and getting ready for livestock the following spring.
Yeah, that was our first priority for sure. We did bring
Oh,
in
yeah.
chickens once we had the well drilled, just because
Oh, yeah.
we wanted to get that started. But that was definitely the first priority, was the house, make it livable for our family so that they didn't have to live in a bunch of chaos past a
Oh,
certain
yeah.
point. And then we moved into livestock really quickly. I was very adamant to my husband that the big livestock that were coming home first were milk cows.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yep.
Before we talk more about milk cows, because we're going to come back to cattle on the overgrazing section, I want to talk a little bit about your chickens and turkeys.
Yeah.
So you got those. What kind of structures are you raising them in? And obviously, I've got to ask, what breeds are you using?
Yep. So that first year, we started building the John Suskovich. I hope I say his name,
Oh, don't
Suskovich.
worry. I mess it up. So I do my best to not have to say his last name, but I
The
know exactly what you're
Yeah.
talking about.
So his style, we looked at all of them. We looked at like the Joel Salatin, like the
Hmm.
smaller ones. And we're really tall. I'm 5'11". My
Oh,
husband's
yeah.
6 foot and so I couldn't imagine like bending and all that kind of
Yes.
stuff. And so we liked the other ones and we liked that we could walk in. And so we started with those. And for breeds, we were doing the big red broilers from McMurray Hatchery,
Oh,
as
okay.
well as just this Cornish cross standard. And we tried both because we wanted to see which ones we liked the best. And we went back to the Cornish cross, which is kind of funny. Um, and then as far as turkeys went, I think we just did the big white ones. I'm not even
Oh,
sure
yeah.
what their actual name is, but they seemed to grow pretty well for what we were doing and in the time frame that we needed them to.
So just on the chickens, why the Cornish cross over the big reds?
For us, it came down to two things. It came down to the grow out time
Oh,
that it takes because the big red broilers were 4 weeks, 5 weeks more just to get them to the size
mhm.
that we wanted because we do
Right.
sell them. We don't take all of them and eat them ourselves. We do have a customer base for them. And then also, when we processed them, we didn't like how we thought that the feathers came out a little bit harder on the big red broilers
Oh,
than on the
interesting.
Cornish
Oh,
cross. And
yeah.
so, since we're processing everything ourselves, we took into like the time that it was taking to do it. And that's why we went back to straight Cornish cross.
Oh, yes. I have two things on that. I have a friend, he's passed away now, but he used to run lots of goats and he told everyone he eats all he can and he sells the rest.
Hmm.
And then on the Cornish crosses, I have some out in a pen right now and I have some pullets with them. And it's just amazing. Those those Cornish cross are twice the size or more of the pullets I have, and they're the same age. It's just crazy how fast they grow.
It is crazy. Unless you get them side by side like that, you don't notice like how
Oh,
crazy the growth it is.
yeah, just crazy growth ability. Now, one thing I noticed on your website, you already have your 2025 wait list uh, for chicken, which I think is wonderful to have that wait list and get it out there and get people. But something I noticed on there, you have bulk pricing available, which,
Yes.
to be honest, until I saw your website, I hadn't even thought about bulk pricing to the consumer or to the consumer before on pasture poultry. I was just thinking by the pound. So
Hmm.
can you talk about that bulk pricing just a little bit and why you did it?
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, it makes more sense to sell by the pound. You're going to make it seems like you're going to make more money. But what happened when we switched from selling by the pound to this bulk pricing, where this last year that we started offering it, they would get
Oh,
a
yeah.
bundle of like 10 in the spring and 10 in the fall. And the way that it is that we educated our customers to say, this will get you through the spring and the fall. And then
Oh,
you
yeah.
won't have 20 chickens or 40 in your freezer. And so then in the fall, when you're ready for your next order, you're filling your freezer before winter. It's the perfect time to get you through. And I think from a marketing standpoint, as long as you can educate them why that's a good idea, they're more than willing to do it. And when I changed it, we went from, selling out each batch through the season as we went to selling out in one day
Oh,
when I
yes.
did it like that. And so it was to me it made sense across the board. I was thinking, how would I want it? Well, I'd want to know what I have for the year
Oh,
and I
yeah.
and I have it secured. I've paid a deposit. I don't have to pay till I get my chickens, but it just made more sense to me for my customers.
Well, I think about the same thing when we're talking selling beef directly to the consumer. I see so many models out there, and if it's working for people, I encourage them to continue their model. And I'm not sure what model you all use, but when we're trying to tell a consumer it's this price per pound, or this price per pound of hanging weight, or just if we can go with a set price or narrow that down, it may cause us not to make quite as much, but it's just so much easier for the consumer.
Yeah.
It,
And
and we got to make it easy.
And for us also, I mean,
Oh, yeah.
if I had to sit there and take time and sell every round that we had coming up,
Oh,
the
yeah.
time that I was putting into that marketing and the graphics and all that kind of stuff,
Oh, yeah.
I saved money doing it the way that we did
Oh,
with the
yeah.
pre-order
Yeah.
bundles.
Well, I love that idea. In fact, like I said, we're growing some pasture poultry right now. I did a test of them, I don't know, 10 years ago that we consumed them all just in house.
Hmm.
Ate too much chicken. So I'm growing out another set, kind of with the same purpose to stock our freezer, but also I may do more pasture poultry next year. I
Yeah,
want to see what kind of market and try and get it out. But I love the idea of bulk pricing.
absolutely. You should definitely try it.
Well, Janelle, we've gotten a little bit about your journey, but we want to go ahead and transition to our overgrazing section sponsored by Redmond. At Redmond, we know that you thrive when your animals do. That's why it's essential to fill the gaps in your herd's nutrition with the minerals that they need. Made by nature, our ancient mineral salt and conditioner clay are the catalyst in optimizing the nutrients your animals get from their forage. Unaltered and unrefined, our minerals have the natural balance and proportion that your animals prefer. This gives your herd the ability to naturally regulate their mineral consumption as they graze. Our minerals won't just help you improve the health of your animals, but will also help you naturally build soil fertility so you can grow more nutrient-dense pasture year after year. Nourish your animals, your soil, and your life with Redmond. Learn more at redmondagriculture.com. In this section, we take a deeper dive into something about your farm. And today we're going to talk about cattle on the homestead. A lot of times we talk about cattle, we talk about managing cattle. And when we talk about it, we're talking more head than a homestead typically has. And I recall you saying earlier that one of your first goals on your farm on Tennessee was to get a milk cow.
Absolutely. We had
Yeah.
one back in North Dakota, and she was the best, for
Oh,
sure.
yes. So what was your goal with getting a milk cow on the farm? Was it just to provide your family with milk?
Yeah, first and foremost was always to give our family. That's the way we are with anything that we bring onto the farm animal wise, is that first for us and what we need to do with it and consume, and then with the extra, with the bounty, then that's what
Right.
we'll sell to people and provide to other people. For a milk cow, man, I love my journey with milk cows. I actually worked at a dairy once I had graduated high school
Oh,
for
yes.
probably about 6 months, and so I love that process, but this is so different from that, like having your
Oh,
own one cow or two cows. But it was important that I put it in place just because we utilize the raw milk, and we take that and we make all the byproducts. We make yogurt and cheese. I mean, everything that you can think of that we take it and we turn it into. And then from there, we were like, well, whatever we have extra, because we did sell raw milk back in North Dakota, that we would
oh, yeah.
just take and it would be part of our business model. But we did end up shifting away from that and taking what we were producing from our cows and turning it back into our farm.
Oh, yes. So how did you do that?
Yeah, so we ended up raising 7 bottle cows this past
Oh,
year with the extra milk. And then also with that, we would ferment our pig feed with the milk, with the
oh, yeah.
skimmed milk, and just to give them just a better nutrition overall. And their growth was fantastic, even through the winter, which was a little bit of a struggle, but that helped immensely. And then we feed it to our chickens. And so we decided that we were going to keep it as much as we could here on the farm instead of selling it. And we found avenues that make it worth us doing that.
So, yeah, so that becomes the question. Is it as valuable to monetize that milk through the avenue of the other animals versus just selling it out?
Yeah, I think that there's people who would probably say no, that they can figure it out and get it. But by the time I put in what it costs me labor-wise to milk my cows, and then what it costs me to run my cows, our girls have to have grain. They just cannot subsist on
Oh, yeah.
just grass. That's just their background, where they came from.
Right.
That I would have had to price this out of like this crazy astronomical amount for it to actually make sense. And so I could take that and turn a profit by diversifying it into our farm.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And what kind of cows are you milking?
We have some jerseys, which kind of are like the gold standard because they're beautiful. They have
Oh,
the big eyes, and our girls are pretty wonderful. They are registered, which didn't matter to us per se, but they were the right price at the right time.
oh, yeah. I completely understand that. Yeah.
Our goal with them when we were looking for milk cows, and I think I was probably a little more anxious to get a cow here or two cows
Mhm.
here, and that I didn't wait like I should have for what we actually wanted for our model for the farmstead, which would have been a cow that can do better on grazing and doesn't need as much inputs,
Oh, yeah.
just saving us cost overall. But I was really swayed by the price of these girls, and
Oh, yes.
they're really wonderful.
Did they come from a conventional dairy?
So we were their third owners. There was a conventional dairy that owned them first, and then some fellow homesteaders owned them for about 6 months, and then things changed within their family, and they were going to go back on the road, and so that's when we had the opportunity to purchase them. So coming from that model, there's no way that they could just be grass fed.
Right. And, we had Suzanne. I'm drawing a blank on her last name.
Like,
Carryman.
yep.
Yeah, we had Suzanne Carryman on the podcast. I can't even think what episode right now, but she talks a lot about the nutrition for dairy cows. And, coming from that conventional model, they're not they're not bred for it. They don't have the right genetics to just survive on grass alone. So yeah.
Yeah, and her and I both agree on this. Her and I could talk together about grain-fed versus grass-fed and dairy cows and all that kind of stuff because I think that actually is a really important topic that people need to realize before they purchase one, especially for their homestead, their farm, their ranch, whatever it may be. Because there's
Oh yeah.
a learning curve with them. Nutrition is so important in dairy cows and beef
Oh yes.
cows.
When we think about my farm, we'll just use it for example. Grazing beef cows. I have some meat goats, some hair sheep. And I talk often that I need a milk cow or two, and I would love to go grass based. But I also know the grasses, the forage I'm growing is not high enough quality for a dairy
Mm.
cow. So if I do a dairy cow, I've got to do some different practices if I want to be grass based. And of course, you got to make sure you have the right genetics as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we've found is that we could use we don't necessarily need to use grains, but it's also what's local to us.
Oh yeah.
What is cost effective to feed them? And we don't have access to a ton of stuff here, which is kind of crazy coming from the bread basket, the North Dakota.
Oh,
They grow all the things.
oh yes. Now, I think you said on your chickens non-GMO. Are you using non-GMO feed for your dairy cows?
We are. So we get all of our feed from a local mill,
Mhm.
family owned company. They grow everything that they have there and they're non-GMO. They're not organic, but they're without the labeling per se.
Oh, yeah.
Really like that we're supporting a local family farm that's growing all that kind of stuff. And we've talked in
Oh,
depth to
yes.
them about everything because it is important to us. It's important to our consumers. So we're thankful that we have that option even.
Before we go on more towards grazing, because that's where we want to get to, do you find with your consumers, and I know you're using your milk in-house now, but consumers all the way across the farm, is non-GMO very important to your consumers? And then is non-soy another topic?
So I think yes, non-GMO is our selling point at where we're at. If
Oh,
we were
yeah.
to jump into like the organic feed that we can, I mean, we're talking I can get it within an hour, but then I have to pay the delivery because it got delivered there from about 4 hours away. It just
Oh,
doesn't
yes.
make sense financially of what I would have to charge them. So most people, if I educate them on non-GMO, where I'm getting it from, what their farming
Oh,
practices
right.
are, they're okay with it. That company that family farm that we're using does use soy. And I actually had to come to a place where I was okay with
Oh, yes.
feeding it to our chickens and our cows and stuff like that. But once you talk to them, once you hear a few things, you kind of decide what works. And if your consumers accept it, then it's okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Let's move just a little bit to your grazing management for your cows. Now we know with your dairy cows, they're getting grain, but how are you managing their grazing for them? And then we'll talk about your beef cows in just a moment.
Yeah, so our dairy cows get moved 1 to 2, like every 1 or 2 days, depending on the size of their paddock through the
Oh yeah.
grazing season. Once spring starts hitting, Right now, they're pretty stagnant. They're about 5-6 days, depending on what their paddock size is doing. But we do
Right.
move them, and it really just depends on what's growing and what season we're in. We did change their calving so that it would hit a little bit better forage times, and so we could do
Oh,
less
yeah.
inputs with grain and stuff like that.
And the cows are dry right now, so that gives you some flexibility because they don't need quite the high plane of nutrition they would normally need.
Yeah, they're not getting any grain, no dairy
Oh,
ration
yeah.
at this point. They're just hay and what they can graze right now.
And when will they be calving again?
The first girl is due mid-February, and then our second
Oh,
girl is
okay.
due just a little bit into March.
For your area, will you start having growth mid-March that's tall enough to graze?
Yeah, we will, thankfully, and that's why we chose to breed them at the time we did, because
Oh, yeah.
when we got them, they were already bred, and so they were fall calvers. One girl was the end of September, and
Oh,
one girl
yes.
was November 7th, and we struggled with their condition just because of the time
Oh,
and the energy needed to get from food for them to not only feed their calves, but for our milking and them
oh,
as a
yeah.
whole. It was really challenging, and we, have I will say that my husband loves nutrition. He geeks out on that kind of stuff, and even he was like, "Oh, this is not
Oh,
great,"
yes.
and the amount of alfalfa we had to throw at those girls through the winter was
Oh, I
staggering,
imagine so.
and alfalfa is not really grown down here, so
Oh, yeah.
it was
Yeah.
really expensive.
Yeah. I can see that. Now, do you run your dairy cows with your beef cows?
The only time we did is when we were breeding them and had a bull on the property. Otherwise, they're separate. I actually think they could go with them, and it's not a big deal. It's just was proximity. If I could keep them a little closer to the house, it would be easier to milk them when it was
Yeah.
time.
You kinda get in that permaculture, what zone they are. You
Yeah,
want them close to the house because you're visiting them quite often.
correct. Yeah. I mean, every day, and in the beginning, it was twice a day they were coming in to be milked, and so we had to have it be where they weren't having to come that far.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I know or dairy cows were one of the first things you added to your farm. Did you add beef cattle shortly after that?
It was quite a bit after we got the girls, I think in April, the beginning of April of 2023, and we added the beef cows January of 2024. So we waited a
Oh,
pretty long
okay.
stretch there. And it was
Yeah.
because, to be honest, we had so many projects going on
Oh, yes.
that we just had to wait. And then I thought it was funny. My husband actually was like, I don't even know if we're going to do beef cows. And I looked at him because that's all he's ever known. And I was
Oh,
like,
yeah.
really? Like, we have all of this pasture and you're not going to do it. And he was like, yeah, that doesn't make sense. And I don't know why he thought that.
So, now I think when we were talking earlier, you mentioned in North Dakota, you'd heard about regenerative practices, but you weren't doing a lot of them on the farm there or ranch there. When you got beef cows earlier this year, did you start with rotational grazing and being aware of that? And if so, what caused you to get there?
Yeah. So the whole time that we did not have beef cows down here in Tennessee, my husband and I have been chatting about how we were going to run them. Like
Oh, yeah.
what were our practices going to be? And we wanted to be more regenerative, even though that wasn't how we were doing it before. But we believe truly that that is the best model. And so
Oh,
I
yeah.
personally had been diving for a few years heavy into the subject because I wanted to know when we were ready, how could we do this and how could we manage this? And so at first, I was teaching my husband quite a bit about what I had been learning, but now he has his degree in animal and range science. And so
Oh,
he
yes.
has the understanding of a lot of these concepts. It's just really putting them into practice in a way that he was never able to do before.
Oh, yeah.
And so when we moved into that, I was just calling it intensive rotational grazing. We were moving them daily onto a new paddock and all of that kind of stuff. We were judging how full they are, what they were leaving
Oh,
over.
yeah.
We weren't doing it based on their weight per se, but just what we could see physically between the room and fill and between what was still left over. And I guess you would call that adaptive multi-paddock
Oh, yeah.
grazing, just because it changed size just based on what we were seeing.
Right.
In the end, I think there's lots of similarities and then little
Oh,
differences.
there is so many names for grazings and grazing methods and different types, and the differences are so minute between some of them. Now, there's some that's a little bit different, but they're
Sure.
all tools in our toolbox. One thing on a homestead versus a bigger ranch, you're working with smaller numbers of animals.
Correct.
And sometimes I feel like, and maybe this is just me as I think about it, those individuals that have one or two cows or just a few, why put the effort into that? Is it worth the squeeze doing this extra work to move them and manage them when you're dealing with smaller numbers?
I'm going to say, coming from a bigger operation where we did not employ those kind of practices, to coming down here where we were really intensive about what we were doing, it made such a huge difference. And I think our minds were blown a little bit because we went
Oh,
through a
yeah.
drought this last summer, and we were able to graze our girls all the way through until August. And then we had, for 2 weeks, had to pitch them some hay. And that kind of had to do a little bit with some Johnson grass. We were trying to make sure that they weren't, because there was quite a bit in the
Oh,
paddock
yeah.
they were going to go into. Just with the whole prussic acid thing, we were just being very cautious with it. But we're shocked at how it's recovered now that we've gotten rain. And we were shocked at how far we were able to go into it with no rain. The amount was staggering, the lack of rain that we had compared to what they normally do. But just what we could see, it was unbelievable to us how well we fared. And we get to see, hand in hand with other people who aren't practicing the same grazing practices as us, like right around us.
Oh,
And
yeah.
heads and tails, we looked so much better. And that's not in a breaking capacity, because all we did was move them. But it was pretty mind-blowing to see.
I completely concur with that. We got pretty dry since July. Now we've had record rain in November, but July, August, September, October, we got really dry. Some of the driest I've seen here, but the amount of grass we were able to it's not really stockpile, but kind of the same thing. We weren't getting water. It wasn't growing very much, but we had plenty of grass out there. Now we're much shorter than what I'd like to be at this time of year. But compared to people who are set stocked on their land, it just looks like we have tons.
Yeah. And I think our perspective, coming from North Dakota, where we dealt with drought, it felt like we dealt with it out of 4 years every 3 years,
Oh,
like 3 years in a row. And then the fourth year was kind of okay.
yes.
We just had a different mindset over drought and management and numbers that we would run. We were always
Oh, yeah.
just so that when we knew that if we had to cull stuff, we would get rid of it. And so I think that helped us coming down here, that we were like, we're not going to overdo it. We're going to pay attention. We're just going to be like
Oh,
really
yeah.
focused on what's going on and willing to let go of stuff. Like I think sometimes for people in this homesteading movement, it's really hard to cull animals if that hasn't been your experience your whole life. You're just stepping into
Oh.
this lifestyle. And we were like, no, we know which ones are going to go right away if we need to.
And that's really difficult. I know growing up, commercial dairy, we always had commercial cattle. I always got in trouble as a kid because I named all the animals. Actually, my animals have names now, but I cull them hard. If they don't perform in my system, I'm a lazy manager and I need cows that work for me. And if they don't work in my system, does not mean they're not a good animal, but they don't work for me. So I sell them, and sometimes that's hard. Even when I don't know that it's super hard for me, but my wife's been shocked. You sold so and so. I said, yeah, she didn't breed back on time, and they have a specific job for me, and I need them to work for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. For us, again, it goes back to family, like taking care of them
Oh,
well. And if
yes.
I'm going to keep an animal on here that's not producing and not fitting what we need it to do, they're headed to the butcher. I mean, I think it's a smart practice. It's a hard practice, right?
It is.
But I think it's the best practice that you can do. I always say to people, you breed the best, eat the rest. And
Oh, yeah.
that's truly what it is for us. And to keep it in, we're not going to Disneyfy our animals. I don't mind giving them names because we do as well. But we don't put human characteristics on animals that
Oh,
are
yeah.
here for a purpose. And
Right.
we're stewarding them well. And sometimes stewarding them well means they don't fit here.
Right, yeah. And I know anytime we're talking about smaller acreage, it doesn't matter. Whatever acreage you have, you maximize. I really hate to use the word maximize because that's never the best. Optimize it. But when we think about smaller acreage, you can only run a certain number of animals. So you need those to be as productive as they can be in your situation for your context.
I do agree. I talk all the time to people about, and to be honest, your podcast has helped so much. I have
Oh,
enjoyed
well,
every.
thank you.
I don't listen to podcasts until I found yours. It was recommended to me, and I started listening, and I'm like, some of this stuff just makes so much sense. And as far as like selecting on observational traits and things like that you can see, and I would like wholeheartedly jumped on that, and that's what I'm trying to teach people as well. Like, you don't specifically need a breed. You need a cow that fits what you're doing. And here's how
Oh,
you can
yeah.
figure that out. And so I think that's like such an important topic. And I should just thank you.
Well, thank you for listening. Appreciate it. Yeah. And we hope we're providing value to others. So I'm glad to hear that.
You most definitely are.
As I think about homesteaders with just a few cows, what do you find may be a limiting factor in them implementing more regenerative practices?
Time. Usually people are
Time
running
is
more than
always
just
an issue.
cattle. There's
Yeah.
other livestock that they're doing, and they're trying to figure out how they can graze them together or what system to do. And a lot of us are working other jobs.
Mhm. Oh,
And so
yeah.
they have very little time. And I mean, if you're farming or ranching, like I get it, like most of us also have other jobs too, but it's just the common theme is a lot of them are not just working on their homestead. This is something they're doing to provide their family with a clean source of food that they're controlling and raising, but they don't have necessarily the time. And so I always try to give people permission to say, we're moving our cows every day and we are seeing the max benefits of it. But if you can move your cows every 3 days or once a
Oh,
week,
yes.
even that's better than never moving them ever. And so giving that permission for people to say, okay, I can only move them every 3 days or every week. And knowing in the future, maybe they can figure out a system where they're going to start moving them more than that. Because I
I,
think all it takes is seeing some results, right?
oh, yeah.
And so if they can see that their fields, their pastures are going to start looking better than their neighbors, and they're going to be, maybe it's because I move them every 5 days versus they don't move them ever.
Oh, yeah. I wholeheartedly agree. Just that next step. If you're set stock and you've got a gate and a fence dividing them, close the gate and put them on one side of it. If if that's to put up electric fence and move them once a week, because we talked earlier, life and work balance, farm and life, farm, work, family balance. It's so tough, and we've got to have time for all of those things. And if it's moving them once a week or on Saturday morning, that's your farm time to set up paddocks for 3 moves that week. And then you just go out and move them. Tuesday evening, you open a gate and move them over or something.
Yep.
Make it simple and easy for you relative to what your needs are and your context. Yeah. You don't have to. And this is what always worries me. We talk about people or we talk to people and what they're doing. I'm out there moving cows every 3 hours. I'm not, but I have talked to people who's doing that. And that's hard if you're not moving cows to think, there's no way I can go out there and move them every 3 hours. You don't have to.
Yeah.
Just
And
move them.
I love that. Yes, that's the thing. Just move them. Anything is better than not moving them at all.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you can think in that mindset, like you are just opening the doors for yourself and taking the pressure off. Because I do
Oh,
agree.
yeah.
Like I follow a lot of stuff and I read a lot of stuff and I consume a lot over grazing. And there's sometimes I'm like, man, good for you guys that you can do that, but I cannot. I can't move them that much.
Oh, yeah. 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 We had Blaine Stacy on the podcast. He lives just a few miles from me, and he was on, I don't know, 3 or 4 episodes ago. Probably, as we think is only 5 years ago, is 10 years ago. He was probably on the podcast 10 episodes ago. Anyway, he talks about for his 80 acres and the way he manages cows, and he puts a strip out. Has 2 strips out. That way, if he's late for work, he's doing moving every day. His wife can go out and open a gate and get him moved. And then it just takes him a few minutes each day. But his goal is daily moves.
Mm-hmm.
But just having a system in place to go and do. I know for lease property, I don't move them as frequently as I move them here because there's travel time over there, and it takes more time than I ever think it will. So I try and set up multiple things. And I I shouldn't admit this. I bought one of those timer gates,
Yeah.
and I've never set it up to use it because it takes a little bit of time to figure it out because I haven't done it before. And then I'd have to monitor it really close just to make sure it works for a little while. It would save me some time and make that lease land a little bit more effective.
Well, I'm really curious to hear how that goes when you get it set up.
It's been riding in the back of my pickup in the back seat for so long, I will not admit how long it's been in there, but it's there. I'm going to do it.
That just feels really accurate for a lot of our lives. There's something riding around the back seat that we've meant to like use and we just haven't.
Right, yeah, and I know once I get it going, as long as it works, as it's displayed to work, or I'll be happy with it, but I just haven't got there yet.
Yeah. There's time spent better in other things at this point.
Yes, yeah. For your all's beef cows, is the plan there to direct to consumer with them?
So that was going to be our goal for 2025 is to have our first
yeah.
offering of direct to consumer beef. And then the drought kind of put a
Mhm.
little damper on that plan. And so we ended up selling actually a lot of those weaned calves. We weaned them
Oh, yes.
for people. We made sure that they were really healthy, that they were eating solid, and like we could send them to people knowing like we feel good.
Oh, yeah.
And because of the way that we are in with our cows every day, those calves, they're not pushy, but they are the most docile, like greatest temperament ever. And not saying that their mamas were bad, but like their heads and tails above what their moms were. And so for other homesteads, we've actually sold quite a few to other homesteads
Oh,
who just
yeah.
want to raise their beef. They just want to bring a couple steers on or a couple heifers or whatever. And so that's been kind of cool to kind of see that there's another market. And then with it, we also get to mentor them through that process.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so that actually was a really cool gift that we didn't see coming. And so I don't know in the future. I'm sure that we'll offer beef from here because of it should happen in the future. But
Right.
I like this whole weaned calf selling to people and giving them that mentorship that a lot of them need because they're so new to livestock and cattle and in general.
And that's an avenue I hadn't thought about, but I love that. When you're out there with your animals, it's it's amazing how calm they are with everything. And when you raise calves in that system, they're even more so. And and I love tame cattle. It just makes everything better.
Hmm.
But selling those calves or wean calves to a homestead who's wanting to finish their own beef, or maybe someone who wants to finish out and even sell to the public or some to the public, that's a great model that I hadn't really thought about. I know as we think about farmers, and I'm really just thinking about myself here, marketing is not my strong point.
Mm,
Uh,
I love
so
marketing. That's my
yeah,
favorite.
yeah. Well, talking. So surprisingly enough, when I think about talking to more people, I think, oh no. But then here I am on a podcast talking to everybody.
Yeah,
So
that's
I
so
don't know. Go
funny.
figure. Well, Janelle, before we transition to Famous Four, do you have anything else you'd like to add about cattle on the homestead?
Yeah, I think what we just talked about is adding two. That's actually that's why we always said to people, get two.
Oh, yeah.
You can feed a steer just like you can feed a heifer. So it doesn't matter if you're going to
Right.
feed them out, but having two, that there's a really good reason to have two at least. And so
Hmm.
every place that we sold to this year took at least two, which was really cool. And for people who are just getting into cattle, why I think steers and heifers, when you're just finishing them out to eat, are so much easier as a starting off curve. You're not having to
Oh,
deal with calving, you're not having to deal with breeding and all of those kind of issues. So this is a great place for people to start setting their foundation of cattle nutrition, how to feed them,
oh,
how to
yeah.
take care of them. And then you move on to the next steps as we mentor those people into it. I love that this is how people start because it just gives them that foundation that they need without jumping into the harder parts of it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So many positives there. I completely agree. Now it's time we transition to our famous four questions, sponsored by Ken Cove Farm Fence. Ken Cove Farm Fence is a proud supporter of the Grazing Grass podcast and grazers everywhere. At Ken Cove Farm Fence, they believe there's true value within the community of grazers and land stewards. The results that follow proper management and monitoring can change the very world around us. That's why Ken Cove is dedicated to providing an ever-expanding line of grazing products to make your chores easier and your land more abundant. Whether you're growing your own food on the homestead or grazing on thousands of acres, Ken Cove has everything you need to do it well. From reels to tumble wheels, polytwine to electric nets, water valves to water troughs, you'll find what you're looking for at Ken Cove. They carry brands like Speedrite, O'Brien's, Kiwi Tech, Strainrite, Job, and more. Ken Cove is proud to be part of your regenerative journey. Call them today or visit kencove.com, and be sure to follow them on social media and subscribe to the Ken Cove YouTube channel at Ken Cove Farm Fence for helpful how-to videos and new product releases. They're the same 4 questions we ask of all of our guests. Our first question: what's your favorite grazing grass related book or resource?
So I'm pretty good friends with a guy named Carson from Redmond, and he got me started on
I know
like
Carson.
you do know Carson, Man Cattle Vel.
Oh, yes.
Love that book. And then also anything Bonsma, like I really am
Oh, yes.
digging any of that kind of stuff. And then to be honest, I have enjoyed all of your podcasts. Those are probably my favorite ones that I'm going through at this time. Anything that
Oh,
I can
yeah.
get my hands on that.
Oh, yes. Excellent resources there. Our second question: what's your favorite tool for the farm?
My favorite tool, I don't know if you'll laugh at this, but is my husband.
Oh, yes. I'm going to laugh, but that's a great one.
I mean it. I say all the time to people that we're mentoring is that if you have a spouse, being able to learn together and
Oh,
not
yes.
having one hold all the knowledge and how to do the things, because if ever they get sick, having that where
Oh,
you're in a
yes.
partnership so that you both know what's going on is really like very helpful. And then secondly, I would say that it's our reels, like
Oh,
where we
yes.
reel up our electric fence. That's number 2. My husband's number 1. He's so smart. He has so much like foundational knowledge because he grew up
Oh, well,
with
very good.
cattle. So
Yes.
that's what I would say.
Excellent resources
And
there,
I would
I'm
say
sure.
that you can't have my husband. So
Yeah,
that's
you have
not
to
one
go
you can go
find your
buy.
own. Yeah. Our third question: what would you tell someone just getting started?
Start slow. I think that and start slow. Number 1, make sure your infrastructure is in place before you bring cattle home. And make sure that you have a mentor in place that is local to you that you can learn from. And if you can't, find the people online that you trust that you can
Oh,
learn
yeah.
from. And then I'm going to say to fellow homesteaders, because I hope that they get out of this mindset, is that they stop going for breeds and they start going based on like what will work better for
Oh,
your farm, your homestead. And I think
oh,
that's
yeah.
really important because we can get so tied up in what is maybe popular, but there's no better salesman for a breed than the people who have that breed. And
Oh, yeah.
and so
Yeah.
I love people to think outside the box. I was talking with Joel Salatin once about what he was running on his place, and though he's not a homesteader and they run in a little different capacity, I just said, "What kind of cattle are you running?" And he said, "Heinz 57 cattle." And
Oh,
he
yeah.
said, "And then we bring in the bulls that we want to do." And I was
Oh,
like,
get
"That's
those
just,"
genetics
I
in.
said, "I feel the same way. Like we get ourselves tied into really expensive cattle when in fact we could probably do with a little less perfect cattle and then breed towards what we want."
Oh, yes. Yeah. Find a farm that's doing what you want to do. Those cows are already set up and understand the system, and
hmm
that'll help you out quite a bit. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And lastly, Janelle, where can others find out more about you?
Yeah, they can find me on social media. On Instagram, I'm Janelle Anderson. I do a lot of education and stuff like that. And then on our website is thehavenfarmstead.com, and we have a whole plethora of different resources that we offer there.
Very good. Janelle, we really appreciate you coming on and sharing today.
Thank you, Cal, for having me. I was so happy to be here.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Grazing Grass Podcast, where we bring you stories and insights into grass-based livestock production. If you're new here, we've got something just for you. Our new listener resource guide is packed with everything you need to get started on your listening journey with the Grazing Grass Podcast. Gives you more information about the podcast, about myself, and next steps. You can grab your free copy at grazinggrass.com/guide. Don't miss out. And hey, do you have a grazing story to share? We're always looking for passionate producers to feature on the show. Whether you're just starting out or have years of experience, your story matters. Head over to Grazing Grass grazing.com/guest to learn more and apply to be a guest. We'd love to share your journey with our growing community of grazers. Until next time, keep on grazing grass.